Hi everyone, we are into May and so it is time for the Zodiac themed painting for May, and this month it is Taurus.
I started off this painting with a layer of watercolor. So what I'm technically doing is just placing some colors on some areas, and these are not exact colors. I'm just laying these colors down to figure out what color needs to go where. This is a composition where I combined a few different reference photos, each of which had a very different chromatic, and the color or even the light source were coming from very different directions. So I was not very sure about what color to put where. So this watercolor layer on this watercolor paper, and this is a Strathmore watercolor paper, usual cold press watercolor paper, which is listed in the watercolor in the material description, in the video description below. So going back to the painting, so this watercolor layer, what it does is it helped me to kind of map, kind of give me a guideline on what color can go where and still the composition work out nicely. This is bull. I don't want it to be I kind of want it to be like a fiery, angry, raging bull. So I have a lot of the colors of fire, but at the same time I kind of want it to look like a bull. Also, not like you don't have to go too far to stretch your imagination. That was my goal. At the same time, the woman back there, it has a very surreal appeal, so I wanted some blue tones over there too. So to combine all the fiery tones and the blue tones, and keep some earthy tones as well to make this entire composition for Taurus work out, this watercolor mapping was really helpful. So as you can see that I'm kind of going in different layers and just putting colors in different areas. This is definitely not a good way to approach the painting if I was to do watercolors and watercolor only, because I'm not blending properly, I'm leaving blotches, there's a lot of blooming, and everything is very unspecific, which would have been a very big deal and a lot of issue if I was planning to go with watercolors and watercolor alone. But that is not my target. I am going to work over this watercolor completely with a layer of oil pastels, in fact multiple layer of oil pastels. So some mistakes in this watercolor layer does not matter at all. In fact, it helps me improve my final painting, and that is the reason I go with this watercolor mapping. That is the reason I choose this set of supplies and this mixed media. It's very helpful for this kind of oil pastel over watercolor compositions. Anyways, now I start off with my oil pastel. Now I have to be more specific, more clear about what direction I want to take, what colors I want to put here. So you can see that I start off with some blues and purples. Definitely not the tones of fire, and definitely not colors that you generally associate with a bull. But this is just laying down some shadow areas. I'm going over that with a lot of dark browns and even a little bit of black. Now, if you're putting black, you have to be very careful, because black can easily make the entire painting very dull and boring, and it will just dominate the area. So use as little black as possible in this time. But anyways, I was putting in the darks first, then I came back with a little bit lighter shade of brown, and I'm using kind of like a brick color brown. And then I took out my clay shaper tool, which I use as an oil pastel blending tool, and you could use any kind of blending tools that you like and that you prefer, and you can use solvents as well. That is totally up to your choice. This is currently one of my favorite ways to blend oil pastel, so I'm using this clay shaper tool, and it's pretty cheap and it works wonderfully as well. So I just push down the amount of pigment that I laid on in this initial layer. What it does is it helps me judge how much of pigment is there already on the paper and what is the effect of that and how much more pigment the paper needs and where I need to do some more color adjustments. So after I laid down that initial layer, I'm also working on the initial layer in the horns of the bull. I got a little bit kind of surreal, imaginative in the horns of the bull. Not necessarily all bulls have that ornate horns, but I just wanted to go all the way very bold, very surreal, very dynamic. So I'm going on to the eye area and I'm putting orange around yellow and then darkening the surrounding areas with a lot of dark browns and even blues so that that orange and yellow pops up very well. And at this point my camera is not placed in a perfectly right condition, but then I changed it and you can see what I'm doing. I'm adding, kind of adjusting the lights and darks and making the contrast pop. In a painting like this, more important than detail is the contrast, because if you put really dark in some areas and then put some lighter areas just next to it, then you are technically guiding the viewer where to look, how to look, and that is what will make your painting really pop. At this point I was getting like really excited about the painting because the bull was coming out really nice. So now I'm putting around the bull like a lot of fire. It's kind of gives me the feeling that the anger, the rage in the bull is kind of putting everything on fire. So put a lot of oranges, very bright reds, a lot of yellows, different ochre tones, gold tones, and a lot of white as well. In fact, I'm also going to use a little bit of purple in certain areas later to get all these fire painted out. And as usual, after putting on the first layer of pigment with the oil pastels, I'm going back and pushing it down with my clay shaper tool, which is my blending tool for this painting for oil pastels. And then I'm coming back with highlights. For the highlights, I'm going with just simple white or a little bit of yellow here and there, just mixing and matching, making them just really pop out, and just hyper impressing the kind of contrast and all that. Now I'm going to the background on the top part of the painting. Like I said, around the girl I wanted a little bit more of the earth tones and even like blues, purples, a little bit brownish areas, and some grays as well. So you can see that I started off with some blues and then I'm extending the fire up quite a bit and kind of trying to get this blue and gray and the fiery red to somehow melt together. And it was kind of really numbing at one point of time because I wasn't really sure whether this is going to work out. Putting all of these colors side by side, it might look very unnatural. It is not realistic for that matter. It is surrealistic, but it might not work out. That was my worry. But I think in the end it finally worked out. Maybe I could have toned down the blue a little bit, but I just wanted to go with it. So I darkened some of the shadow areas of the blue once again to make the contrast even bolder. This painting was all about the contrasts, and I had to like really hype it up as much as possible. So going on again onto the background, I'm adding some more very dark kind of neutral blues and going over that with dark grays and a little bit of bright blues so that it's not too bright, at the same time it's not too dull as well, somewhere in between. And then pushing that pigments with and blending them all with the blending tool so that you can have a good judgment of how much pigment is there on the paper and whether I need any more pigment. Then I came back with my orange red color and just added tiny flecks on the paper, which kind of is resembling flecks of fire from the flames. Now I'm working on the hair. So initially I put some purples, blues, browns, and then pushed it down with the blending tool, and then I'll come back with some highlights. For highlights I will be using grays around the top part of the hair, and a little bit of blues here and there to tone down the grays. Then I'm working on the clothing around the hair and the body, and just wanted to do the hands first with a lot of dark blues and purples. I know, body color, this is definitely not human body color, but depending on the background, I wanted the background colors to kind of resonate with the figure, so I had to tone it. I had to kind of improvise the coloring, so kept it more like a bluish body color, like it's a night scene or something. Then painted the spear as well and blended it down. I kept it kind of obscure because at this point I thought that I shouldn't put too much detail in the figure, around the figure, because it's kind of at the back of the painting and I wanted the bull to take the prominence in the painting. But I blended it all together, made sure everything had enough amount of paint, pigment, and contrast. And that is pretty much it about this painting. I hope you like this painting, and if you did, give me a thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe, and I will be back next week.